You think money grows on trees, Margaret? You've been draining my account for 37 years and you have absolutely nothing to show for it. That was what my husband said to me on a Tuesday morning in September, standing in our kitchen in Barrie, Ontario, still in his housecoat, holding a coffee mug I had washed and set out for him the night before. I didn't say anything. I just turned back to the stove, lowered the flame under the oatmeal, and stirred slowly. I had learned, over nearly 4 decades of marriage, that silence was sometimes the only dignified response to something that didn't deserve one. But I want to tell you what happened next. Because what happened next changed everything. I'm 63 years old now. I was a teacher for 31 years elementary school, grade 4 and 5, in the same building on Dunlop Street where I started at 25. I retired 3 years ago with a good pension from the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan, modest but reliable. I paid into it my entire career. I never missed a contribution. I managed our household budget the way I managed my classroom, carefully, patiently, with detailed records and very little wasted energy. My husband had spent most of his career in project management at a construction firm in the city. He made more money than I did, especially in his later years, and he never once let me forget it. Not in a dramatic way, not with shouting or cruelty, he was too composed for that, but in small, consistent ways that accumulated over time, the way interest accumulates in an account. Comments at dinner. Sighs at receipts. The particular way he would glance at a grocery bag and say, "That looks expensive," before I'd even set it down. In the early years of our marriage, we pooled everything. One joint account, 2 names, all our income flowing in, and all our bills flowing out. That was how my parents had done it, how most couples I knew did it. But when we were about 12 years into our marriage, my husband sat me down with a spreadsheet he had printed at the office, actually printed and highlighted in yellow, and explained that he wanted to separate finances. He said it made more sense. He said it was more modern, more fair. He said a lot of things that evening, and I was tired after a long week of parent-teacher interviews, and I agreed. The arrangement was this. We would each contribute equally to a shared household account for mortgage, utilities, property taxes, groceries, and car insurance. Everything else we managed separately. At the time, this sounded reasonable. What I didn't fully account for, what I couldn't have known at 32, was how differently we would interpret the word everything else. To my husband, everything else meant that when his mother's furnace broke down in Sudbury and she needed help, that came from his account, not ours. When he bought new golf clubs, that was his money. When he took weekend fishing trips with his brother, that was his money too. Fine, I understood that. I respected it. But when our daughter needed braces at 14, when the school trips needed to be paid for, when the birthday parties and the winter boots and the school supplies added up somehow, those things migrated toward me. Not all at once, not in any formal agreement, just gradually, the way furniture shifts in a house over years. I covered the difference when the household account ran short. I said nothing because I knew if I said something, it would turn into a conversation about how much more he contributed overall, and I didn't have the energy for that conversation, not on a Thursday after a full day of teaching. I also did something that my husband did not do. I kept records. I kept a small notebook, then later a spreadsheet on my laptop, because I am a teacher and teachers document things. Every grocery run where I spent from my personal account to make up the gap. Every school expense I covered. Every household item, a new shower curtain, a replacement vacuum belt, salt for the driveway in February that came out of my money quietly, without ceremony, without notice. By the time that September morning arrived, the one with the housecoat and the coffee mug and the line about draining his account, I had 25 years of records. He made that comment because I had bought new kitchen curtains. $48.79 at HomeSense in the Bayfield Mall. I had used my own money, my own personal account, nothing from the household fund. The old curtains had yellowed, and the rod had broken twice already, repaired twice by me with a kit from Canadian Tire. I thought $48 was very reasonable. Apparently, it was an occasion for a speech. I said nothing that Tuesday morning. I stirred the oatmeal. He left for his golf game, retired now himself for 2 years. Always a game or a card night or something with his brother, and I sat at the kitchen table with my tea and I thought about things. Not in a dramatic way. In the way you think, when you've been quiet about something for a very long time and the quiet has simply run out of room. The following month, the first weekend in October, was Thanksgiving. In our family, Thanksgiving had always been at our house. I had hosted it for 31 years without exception. His mother, his brother Gary, and Gary's wife from Aurelia, his sister from Collingwood, her husband, their 3 adult children, sometimes partners of those children. The head count varied, but usually landed somewhere between 14 and 18 people. I planned the menu in August. I started baking the Wednesday before. I made the turkey, 2 kinds of stuffing, sweet potatoes, roasted Brussels sprouts, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce from scratch, 2 pies and a cheesecake. My husband's contribution to this dinner, historically, was carrying the extra folding chairs up from the basement and making sure there was enough beer and wine. That year, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, my husband made an announcement over dinner. His college roommate, a man named Dave who had moved to Calgary decades ago, was going to be in Ontario for the weekend with his wife and his adult son. Could they come for Thanksgiving? Of course. That made 21. Then his mother called to say she was bringing her neighbor, an older woman who had recently lost her husband and had nowhere to go for the holiday, 22. Then Gary decided to bring his 2 brothers-in-law who were in town, 24. I found out about each addition through small mentions in passing. Oh, by the way, Dave's wife has a nut allergy. By the way, my mother's friend is vegetarian. By the way, Gary's bringing a couple extra. Each, by the way, arrived without discussion, without asking if it was manageable, without acknowledgement that it changed anything at all. On the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I sat down at my kitchen table with a full list for the first time. 24 people, 2 of whom had dietary restrictions I'd only just learned about, and I looked at the household grocery budget for October and I did some arithmetic. A proper Thanksgiving dinner for 24 people in Ontario in 2023 was not a casual expense. A good-sized turkey ran $30 to $40, and I'd need 2 of them. The sides, the baking supplies, the extra chairs I'd need to rent because we only had 18, the good paper napkins, because my mother-in-law commented on paper napkins every single year, but I had stopped using cloth after the 3rd time someone left one balled up and rust-stained in the wash I was looking at. Easily $350 above what the household account held that month. I mentioned this to my husband. He looked up from his tablet. "You always spend too much on food," he said. "You don't have to make everything from scratch. Get some things from the grocery store deli. Keep it simple." "There are 24 people coming," I said. "People don't expect a 5-star meal," he said. "You overthink it." 2 of them have dietary restrictions I just found out about this week, I said. He shrugged. "You're good at that stuff. You'll figure it out." Then he went back to his tablet. I looked at him for a moment. He had a Tim Hortons cup next to him, a large double-double, same as always, which I had picked up for him that morning on my way back from the pharmacy, and he was reading something on his screen, already done with the conversation, already confident that the problem had been handed off and would be handled. I said, quietly, "I just want to make sure we're aligned on the budget." "Don't go overboard," he said. "It's just family. Just family. 24 people, 2 turkeys. A vegetarian and someone with a nut allergy. And a cheesecake, because his mother would look around for the cheesecake and if it wasn't there, she would mention it to Gary, and Gary would mention it to my husband, and my husband would give me a look." I nodded slowly. I went to the kitchen and I got my notebook. I will tell you what I did not do. I did not cry. I did not call my sister in Guelph to vent, though I have done that before and she is very good at listening. I did not draft a long email explaining how I felt, which is also something I have done before, in the early years, before I understood that a long email would only result in a longer conversation about why I was being emotional. What I did was sit down at my kitchen table, the same table where I had been sitting for 31 years, the one with the small burn mark near the edge from a candle I had foolishly left lit during a dinner party in 1998, and I opened my laptop, and I opened the spreadsheet I had been quietly maintaining for 25 years. The spreadsheet had columns: date, description, amount, category, whether it came from my personal account or the household account, notes. There were over 900 entries. I spent that evening and the following morning updating it, filling in what I hadn't recorded in the last few months, and then I added a new section. This new section was for the Thanksgiving dinner. I priced everything out carefully. 2 turkeys at the current price at the Barrie location of my grocery store. Stuffing ingredients. Sweet potatoes. The Brussels sprouts my sister-in-law's children would pick around, but my husband's brother would eat 3 servings of butter, an unreasonable amount of butter, because it was Thanksgiving. Cranberries, fresh, because he didn't like the canned kind. Flour and sugar for the pies. Cream cheese for the cheesecake. Whipping cream. The chair rental for the extra seating. Good napkins. A bottle of sparkling apple cider for the 2 people who didn't drink. 3 cases of beer. 2 bottles of red wine and 2 of white. I added it all up. Then I divided it by 24, 1 per guest, and then I looked at that number for a while. I also looked at a different number. A number I had thought about over the years, but never written down. It was the number that researchers and government agencies periodically published when they were trying to calculate the economic value of unpaid household labor in Canada. The most recent figure I had seen, from a Statistics Canada estimate a few years prior, put the replacement value of household work, cooking, cleaning, laundry, childcare, household management at somewhere between $10 and $20 an hour, depending on the task. I used the lower number. I was feeling generous. I calculated the hours I had spent on household labor over 37 years of marriage. I was conservative. I did not count the years when our daughter was young and I was effectively running a household while also teaching full-time, because I knew those numbers would seem extreme and I wanted to be reasonable. I calculated only the hours I could document or credibly estimate. Cooking, 1.5 hours per day on average, more on weekends. Cleaning, 4 hours a week. Laundry, 2 hours a week. Grocery shopping, household management, scheduling, the appointments and the forms and the warranty cards, and the remembering where everything was, 3 hours a week. I did not include the emotional labor of 37 years of Thanksgiving dinners. That seemed hard to quantify, and I wanted to keep the spreadsheet professional. The total, at $10 an hour, the lowest reasonable estimate, was substantial. It was, in fact, more than the outstanding balance on the mortgage we had paid off 8 years ago. I printed the spreadsheet. I printed it on the good printer paper, not the recycled stuff, and I put it in a manila folder and I set it on the counter. Then, I made my grocery list, went to the store, and bought everything I needed for 24 people. Thanksgiving morning was cold and clear, the kind of October day that Ontario does beautifully. The maple out front had turned completely, and the light through the kitchen window was amber and warm. I was up at 5:30, same as always. Turkey in the oven by 6. By 9, the house smelled the way it always smelled on Thanksgiving morning, and I had made coffee and set out the good mugs and put a basket of the small maple leaf shortbread cookies I bake every year on the front table. My husband came downstairs at 8:30, poured himself a coffee, looked around the kitchen with a satisfied expression, and said, "Smells great in here." "Thank you," I said. "Did you get the sparkling water? Gary's wife mentioned she might want sparkling water." I had gotten sparkling water. I had gotten it specifically because Gary's wife had mentioned it in a text to my husband which he had forwarded to me at 10:30 at night. "I got it," I said. "Great." He picked up the sports section of the newspaper, an actual physical newspaper, which we still subscribed to and which I still brought in from the driveway every morning, and he went to sit at the kitchen table. "I'm going to need the table clear by 11, I said. "I'll need the space to set up." "I'll move," he said, without looking up. I stirred the gravy base and thought about the manila folder on the counter. Everyone arrived between noon and 1. His mother came first, as always, because she liked to position herself as an early arrival, which she felt gave her certain rights in the kitchen. She was a formidable woman, 79, sharp-eyed, with opinions about everything including the temperature at which one should serve sweet potatoes. She looked around the kitchen and said, "You're doing the cheesecake again this year?" And I said yes. I was doing the cheesecake again this year. And she nodded and sat down at the kitchen island and began commenting on how her neighbor liked things and whether there was a place for the neighbor to sit that wasn't too drafty. Gary and his wife came next, then the sister from Collingwood with her husband, then the neighbor, a quiet woman of about 75, who looked slightly overwhelmed by the volume of the gathering and whom I immediately liked, Dave from Calgary, his wife, his son, Then more of the cousins and the extended connections, the chain of people who materialized every October as predictably as the leaves turning. By 12:30, there were 23 people in my house, with one still on the way, and it was loud and warm and complicated in the way that only large family gatherings are, and I moved through all of it with the efficiency I had built over 31 years of Thanksgiving logistics. I kept track of who needed what. I made sure the vegetarian had a full plate that wasn't just sides. I put the nut-free cheesecake in a separate area and mentioned quietly to the guest with the allergy that the small one on the left was safe. My husband stood by the back door with Gary and Dave, nursing a beer, comfortable and relaxed, the host in the way that he understood hosting, which was to welcome people at the door and then exist congenially near the drinks. At 2:00, I called everyone to the table. It is a long process, seating 24 people. We had the dining room table extended to its full length, 2 folding tables borrowed from the community center, the extra chairs from the rental place. The house felt full and warm, and the food was exactly right. I know my own cooking, and that year it was exactly right, and there was the pleasant noise of serving dishes being passed, and wine being poured, and conversation, starting up in 3 different registers at once. My husband stood at the head of the table and said what he always said, which was a short thank you to everyone for being there, a nod toward being grateful for what we had, and then this part was new. This year, he said, "And thank you to my wife for putting all this together. She really does make it look easy, doesn't she?" Everyone clapped. His mother smiled and said, "She always has." I smiled. I looked down the table at 24 people eating food I had spent 3 days preparing, sitting on chairs I had arranged, in a house I had managed for 31 years, and I thought about what he had said to me 2 weeks before. "You've been draining my account for 37 years, and you have absolutely nothing to show for it." I had put the manila folder in the side table drawer in the hallway, which is where I keep things I intend to return to. After dinner, after the pie and the cheesecake, after the tea and the coffee and the long process of people beginning to gather their coats and say goodbye with the particular extended ritual of large Canadian family leave-taking, after his mother and her neighbor had been helped to their car, after Gary had loaded the borrowed card table into his truck, after the last guest had driven away and the house had gone quiet, I cleared the dishes and loaded the dishwasher and wiped the counters, and then I went to the side table drawer and I took out the folder. My husband was in the living room. He had his feet up, the TV on low, a familiar posture of comfortable exhaustion, the exhaustion of a man who has had a satisfying day. He looked relaxed. He looked like someone who had just hosted a successful Thanksgiving. I sat down in the chair across from him, which was not my usual spot. I usually sat on the sofa and I set the folder on the coffee table between us. "I'd like to talk about the finances," I said. He looked at the folder. "Tonight? I'm pretty tired." "I know," I said, "but I think tonight makes sense." Something in my tone was different enough that he sat up slightly. He reached forward and picked up the folder. "What is this?" he said. "It's a spreadsheet," I said. 25 years of household expenses that weren't covered by the shared account. Things I covered from my personal account. Everything documented by date. He opened it. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the first page. "I also included," I said, "a calculation of unpaid household labor. I used Statistics Canada's methodology and the lowest published estimate. I was conservative." He turned to the second page. "The Thanksgiving dinner for 24 people this year cost $412.16, I said. "The household account had $160 available. I covered the difference from my personal account. I'm adding that to the total." He was very still. "I'm not asking you to pay any of this back," I said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not presenting this as a bill. I'm presenting it as a record. Because 2 weeks ago you told me I had spent 37 years draining your account and had nothing to show for it, and I wanted us both to have an accurate picture of what the last 37 years have actually looked like." He set the folder down. He looked at it for a moment, and then he looked up at me, and his expression was something I hadn't seen on him in a long time. It was not anger. It was something closer to the look a person gets when they have said something they cannot take back and they know it. "Margaret," he said. "I'm not angry," I said, which was true. I had expected to feel angry, sitting in that chair, but what I felt was something much quieter, something close to clarity. I'm genuinely not angry. I think we've had different understandings of what our arrangement has meant, and I think it's worth us both seeing it clearly. He was quiet for a long time. The TV murmured in the background, a hockey pregame, the sound familiar and small. I said something harsh to you, he said finally, about your spending. You've said several things, I said. Over a long time. I didn't mean he started. I know what you meant, I said. I know you didn't mean it the way it sounds in retrospect, but I've been doing something for 25 years, Bob. I've been keeping records because I knew that without them, I wouldn't be able to have this conversation. I knew that if I said, you don't appreciate what I contribute, it would become a disagreement about feelings. I wanted it to be a conversation about facts. He picked up the folder again. He looked at a few more pages. I watched his face move through something recognition, maybe discomfort, something I didn't have a precise word for. This is a lot of numbers, he said. Yes, I said. It's 37 years of a household. It's an enormous amount of numbers. He set it back down. He looked at me directly then, which he sometimes didn't do in difficult conversations. He often looked slightly to the side, at the middle distance, and he said, "What do you want to happen?" "I want us to talk about things honestly," I said. "Not tonight, because it's late and it's been a long day. But I want us to have a different kind of conversation about money and about what we each contribute. And I want it to be a real conversation, not one where I feel like I'm defending myself from an accusation." He nodded. He was quiet again. "I want to stay married to you," I said. And this surprised me slightly when I said it, because saying it out loud made me realize how much I meant it, and also how uncertain I had been sitting at my kitchen table in September, stirring oatmeal, whether that was still true. "I want to stay married to you, but I need things to be different." "Different how?" he asked. "I need you to understand that what I do here is not nothing," I said. "I need the comment about the curtains to be the last time that conversation happens. I need you to know, really know, that when you invite 24 people for Thanksgiving, that is not something that happens by itself." "I know it doesn't happen by itself," he said. "I don't think you do, Bob," I said gently. "I don't think you have, for a very long time. And I don't entirely blame you for that. I've made it easy to not know. I've handled things quietly and efficiently for so long that it's become invisible. But I need it to stop being invisible." He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something that surprised me. He said, "I'm going to read all of this." "Okay," I said. "All of it," he said. "Every page." "There are 37 pages," I said. "Then it'll take me a while," he said. I stood up. I picked up my tea mug from the side table and I went to the kitchen to rinse it, and I turned off the lights in the dining room and checked that the stove was off, which I always check twice because I always have, because it is my habit, one of 10,000 small habits that keep this house running, and then I went upstairs. I did not sleep well that night, but not from anxiety. It was more like the feeling after you have put something very heavy down, a particular kind of restlessness, muscles that have held tension for so long they don't entirely know how to release it. In the weeks that followed, things were different. Not perfectly different, not transformed overnight. I am a practical woman and I do not believe in overnight transformations, but different in the small ways that matter. He started asking before he committed us to anything. When his mother called to say she wanted to come for an extended visit in November, he said he would need to check with me first. He actually said that. He came and found me in the garden, where I was putting the beds to rest for the winter, and he said, "My mother wants to come for 2 weeks in November. What do you think?" I stood up and looked at him. "I'd prefer 1 week," I said. "1 week," he said, and he went back inside and he called his mother and he said 1 week. He also, without my asking, started doing the grocery pickup on Thursday mornings, which is something I had been doing alone for years. He started asking what we needed. He looked at the household account ledger, something he had not done once in the 25 years we'd had the arrangement, and he said, one evening in late October, "We should probably increase the monthly contributions. Things cost more than they did when we set this up." They did cost more. They had been costing more for years. I had been absorbing the difference in silence and recording it in a spreadsheet. I told my sister about all of this. Eventually, over the phone one Sunday afternoon in November when the first real snow was coming down, she listened and she was quiet, and then she said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it. "I feel like I can breathe," I said, which tells me something about how I've been feeling before. She said, "Do you think he actually understands?" I thought about that too. The honest answer was, I didn't know. I thought he was trying to understand. I thought reading 37 pages of documented household expenses in his reading chair with his glasses on, which he had done over the course of a weekend while I went about my regular Saturday and Sunday, was a genuine act of effort for a man who had spent a long time not looking. Whether effort translated into understanding, that was a slower process, a different timeline. What I knew was that I had carried something for 25 years, and I had set it down. I had done it without shouting, without ultimatums, without drama. I had done it with a spreadsheet and a quiet voice in a living room after Thanksgiving dinner, with hockey murmuring on the television in the background. My mother used to say that the most powerful thing a woman could do was keep very good records and wait for the right moment to open the folder. My mother was not a sentimental woman. She was a bookkeeper, and she believed in documentation, and she raised me the same way. I keep the spreadsheet. I still update it every month, not because I need to. Not in the same way things have genuinely shifted, and I no longer spend from my personal account to cover gaps in the household fund, but because I am a teacher, and teachers document things, and because somewhere in me, the habit has become the point. The act of noticing, the act of writing it down. The curtains in the kitchen look very nice, by the way. The light comes through them in the morning in that particular way that October and November have, amber and low and true. I have my tea at the kitchen table and I look at them, and I think that $48.79 was, in fact, very reasonable. And every Thanksgiving since, I have not done it alone.